For a lot of us is being able to communicate effectively with different people. And part of that communication comes through written language. And so we're going to talk about that today. But what I do want to talk about to start with is there's three big principles and things that I'm going to talk to you, and just to put them on your mind, is the number one thing is adapting to your audience. It's so important that we talk to the people, we understand who we're talking to. And then we also want to make sure we maximize the signal to noise ratio. That's making sure that we get our message across in the right manner. And then the last thing would be making sure we use effective redundancy. We don't want to continue to say the same thing over and over again, but we want to be effective in how we say it, so that that message is, we make sure that it's very clear, very concise, and then it gets across. So as we're talking about engineering and science and technology, mathematics, all these STEM fields, we each get to learn really cool stuff. And there's some really fun things, but we got to make sure that we can communicate that to people to get our message across. We want to make sure that we are understanding who our audience is and what they want from us. So to get things started, we're going to start with the one question. I have it there on the Google Forms. It basically says, it's a statement, it's with true or false, and I've added a third category there. So if you don't know, you can plug that one on there too. So first of all, the Earth's magnetic north pole is stationary, or is constant, okay? It's constant. And I want you to think about that and then throw that on there. And I'm going to check out right now and see what your responses are. And how many do we have in the class? That way I can kind of get a gauge of how many people have responded.
We have 10, about 12, 13, 14 people here, I think.
Okay, great.
60. Did you find it? It's at the top where it says questions here. Yeah, they're still like popping into the forms.
That's good. Oh, hey, and somebody else did put in a question basically saying, if you want to ask me any questions, there's definitely some reasons, some things that I can address. So throughout the whole entire time, if you want to throw in a question there that you want me to come back to and answer, I will gladly do that. So jot that down. That's on a different section there. So you can add any questions you want, and we'll see which ones we can get to at the end.
You know what's also entertaining me is the fact that you're totally down the street right now.
Yeah, I know.
He lives over off Possum Run. So like he's in his office upstairs having this conversation with us.
Yeah. I wish I was there in the classroom. I enjoy that so much more. But.
And then did you tell them that you're at AFIT right now?
Oh, I don't know if I did. So I am currently at the Air Force Institute of Technology, which is up on the campuses on Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
Been studying systems
engineering.
Yeah.
Awesome. We have got all of these responses in. And so the class basically is kind of divided in half. Half the people say it's false, that it's not constant. And then half say either I don't know or it's true. Yeah, it's constant. So let me just suggest this one thing to you. And if you want to go back in there and change your comments, you're welcome to. But I want to say that this is the method of navigation that we have been using for thousands of years. We have been using this method of navigation from ancient times up to more recent times, which is still 1,000 or plus years ago, is of Christopher Columbus and navigating across the ocean, up to current time frames. We're even doing research right now at AFIT on magnetic navigation and how we can incorporate that with other types of navigation to have what's called all source navigation. So having all these multiple sources coming in and making sure that we're synced, because if I have a bad guy that wants to distort a signal and says, hey, your GPS location's not here, it's actually over here. Well, I want to make sure that I have multiple backups that can give me the right answer. So this is a method that we've been using for thousands of years. Now, if you want, I'm going to give you just a little bit of time. if you want to change your answer, you are welcome to click that if you want to. And I will see if anything changes here. Just give you a little bit of a moment to think about that.
Are they holding fast?
No, they're changing a little bit.
They're changing? Okay.
So the I don't knows didn't change very much. I think anyone that was in the I don't know category either stayed there or somebody went in there as they left. So I think that category stayed the same. There's a few people that have decided to say, hey, I'm swinging from false to maybe true. So that changed. Now, as I want to talk about that, did I give you any additional information that would have persuaded you? What did I tell you?
Turn to your neighbors, have a conversation. What changed you? And those of you who are joining us remotely, I think our chat feature is open. So you are also welcome to use the chat feature to talk to one another, Cambry and Sydney and Meredith and Caitlin and Ava.
So show of hands, either you can do it through the chat or you can raise your hand. How many of you were persuaded by what I said? Or did you change your answer at all? Okay, at least a hand or two come up. That's interesting. So I didn't tell you whether or not what was the right answer. I told you kind of where the consensus was, gave you some additional information, and then we kind of retook it and it changed a little bit, not significantly. And that's totally fine. What I think is very interesting here is if we look at that question, there's some things that are, I think, kind of difficult. When we think about engineering and we talk about this context, I'm going to do something real quick. I'm going to share my screen. Oh, let's see here if I can find it. Okay. When we talk about this, what's interesting is I use this word stationary or constant. Okay. Is that well defined? Did I define what that means? Sometimes I don't. So I think in the forms, in Google Forms, I actually probably put constant, didn't I? I think I put constant, and then up here, I think I have it as written as stationary. But what I think is so interesting is if I don't define what that term means, there's a lot of ambiguity. It becomes hard or difficult to know exactly what I, as the person writing the statement, mean. And so I think that's just really important as you take that into consideration. Now, I want to show you something. This is the actual magnetic North Pole here. Well, let's see. Okay. So this is a diagram from a textbook. And it shows, here's generally where that magnetic North Pole is located, okay? And if you'll see, this is year-to-year changes, not obviously every year. This is 25-year gap right here at the very bottom. And you're seeing this magnetic North Pole is actually shifting significantly, okay? If you look at this smaller diagram, this is telling you that from midnight to noon, so on a space of 12 hours, it is shifting 85 kilometers. Where your needle would point to, if you were standing closer to this, you'd actually see a really marked difference of going, hey, I'm over here this morning and now I'm way over here. That's going to change significantly as the closer you get to it. This is about the distance from along the I-70 from Dayton to Columbus. This is really about that distance. You're talking a pretty significant distance that's happening throughout 12 hours of the day, and then it's coming back. And then over the years, it's marched along hundreds of kilometers. So it's definitely not constant. Even throughout the day, it's not constant. But if I didn't define what constant I was talking about, then that could be really difficult. The reason why I say that is because can I constantly get a north indication? Yeah, I can. And that's true. So in science, it's really important that we are clear about what we say and what we want to say. That becomes very, very important. So as we come back to this, I'll show some other things too, but I really think it's just so amazing that that one phrase, that one word can all of a sudden mean something completely different to me, can mean something different to you, and it can mean something different to a third person who has a third definition or understanding of that word or phrase. So one of the things we have a struggle with and a challenge with is making sure that we understand who that audience is, making sure we're giving a clear message across to them, and then making sure that we can reiterate that point using additional information and additional evidence to substantiate our claim and possibly even our definition of what we're meaning. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into those three things, but I want you to understand that whole big concept of what we're talking about is effectively communicating, especially through technical writing. So I'll share a couple experiences from my own experience within the military, being an engineer. So I'm a technical expert in certain fields, but I've had to deal with people that are technical experts as well, and people that are not. And how I communicate that are completely different to both of those people. And we'll talk a little about that too. And then we'll go into and we'll talk about, I got a couple examples on one thing that would help you understand what this maximizing the signal to noise ratio means, and then also effectively using redundancy. So with that, I'm going to share my screen once again, and you should be able to see that and me, and we will get going. Here we go. All right. So I do want to say right up front that some of the slides that I'm going to use are actually from somebody else. I went to a lecture that this professor used. He's Professor Jean-Luc Demont, and I'm not able to move this forward, it seems. Okay. We'll see if I can get my slides to progress forward. I'm still on the magnetic North Pole slide. There we go. Okay. So, but most of these slides I pulled from him. He gave a lecture in 2007 at the University of Ghent in Belgium. He's from Belgium, and he just did a fantastic job and just captured a lot of these things in a simple format that I just resonated with me. And I wanted to share some of those with you as well, because I think they're so important as you look to possibly working in a technical field. If you're looking into science or technology, engineering or mathematics, or if you're planning to go to a university and you work in any technical field, a lot of what we do, the pinnacles of our achievements are documented. So when I got my master's degree, I wrote a thesis, and that thesis was over 100 pages long and was a written document that I got graded on. And now that I'm in my PhD, I'm in the final year of my studies, and my one meaningful paper will be a dissertation. It's going to be a compilation of actually journal articles that I've written, and then presentations, but it's really going to come down to a written defense, and then I'll actually have to speak on my topic, and they have to make sure that I know what I'm talking about. But it's incredible. The pinnacle of my educational experience will rest on one document. And I think that's very profound. So hopefully that encourages you that taking this serious, that technical writing is really important. Regardless of what field you're in, if you're going to go into some technical field, this is going to be part of what you do. You're going to write. And it's just so neat. It brings in lots of things that you're learning right now. So good on you for getting this information out there. Well, cool. Effective communication is all about getting your audience to do something, right? You want them to do something. Well, I think you want them to pay attention. You want them to understand what you're talking about, and you want them to be able to act upon what you've talked about. And really, it's all about acting upon a message that you're trying to convey. Now, specifically, I think this diagram shows it so well. As an engineer or as a scientist, mathematician, you're going to know lots of stuff. But it begs the question, so what? So what if you've made a cool widget or gadget? Or so what if you wrote a new equation? Wow, great. Why do I care? And so you're trying to answer this question of so what or why should I care about your work? And that's this message. You've got lots of information, you've got lots of data, you've done lots of research, and you're trying to convey this of why this is important, or so what? Why should I care? And that effective communication comes in different forms. It can come verbally, but it can also come in that written form. And you're really trying to do this, pass as many messages or as many packets of information that are relevant to that person as you can within the given constraints. And that ends up being the culmination here. So effective communication is optimization under constraints. We use that word in science a lot, to optimize, to get the maximum number of messages given constraints. Now, what could be your constraints? Well, let me share a personal experience with you, okay? So I'm an engineer, and I'm a civil engineer. And one of the things that we deal with all the time, sorry, I'm going to skip that page, okay? One of the things we deal with is pavements. Now, that might not excite you, but I get super excited about pavements. We do a full class when we're first coming into the Air Force, and it's all on pavement. It's about airfield pavement specifically. Now, this is not airfield pavement. This is a pavement where out in front of a building. And what you're seeing here in this first picture is longitudinal and latitudinal cracking. And what happens is we do this thing on runways or roads. You've probably seen it in your neighborhoods, where they mill or take off the top layer of asphalt, and then they come back and they put a new layer on asphalt, and it's nice and pristine. There's a problem here. These cracks, if you see that they're not repaired, we didn't do any repair to the cracks underneath. So we cut off a top layer of pavement, of asphalt, and we're going to put it right back on top. What ends up happening is the weakness that crack is showing us. There's a weakness in that pavement. There's weakness, maybe that weakness is in the base course or underneath the pavement. Maybe the weakness is due to rain or water accumulation. There's different things that we look at. But that weakness is going to show back up on that new layer of asphalt. And I'll have my lifespan of my asphalt will decline. Now, I care about that because I'm an engineer, and I want the stuff that I put in to last. I really do. I want it to last. I want it to look good, and I want it to be effective. But for the person that uses it, do you care? Do you care if there's reflective cracking? Do you care if it has the structural capacity that it's rated for? You just want to make sure that you can drive from home to work or home to school and then back. And so understanding my audience is really important. Case in point is we did an airfield pavement evaluation in Honduras. So I was down in Honduras. I was doing a mission set down there, and we did a runway survey of all the airfield pavements. We looked at every single pavement structure. We gave it a rating. We said whether it was good or bad, and basically defined all the structural capacities and all of the different characteristics of that pavement. Once we did that, using all sorts of fun and fancy equipment, once we did that, we can then look at every single section of pavement, and I can paint it into a picture. This is for the engineers that were with us. We'd say, hey, there's a probability of failure. There's parts of that are likely or more likely to fail. Parts of this runway are more likely to fail. And there's a consequence of that. And I can use this kind of technical speak to then quantify our findings. And we can say, hey, this is the risk we're taking in this. Now that communicates with some people, but still the people that are flying airplanes, they really just want to know, am I good to fly or am I not good to fly? That's what I care about. And so then we take all that information and we boil it down to just some little pie chart that says, hey, these things are green, these things are yellow, we need to go fix them, and this is red, don't do this, or we really need to get after that part of it. And honestly, just understanding who you're talking to changed all the description. We used lots of description for the engineers and the people that were technically that needed to fix the problem, to people that were mission owners that wanted to fly on this airfield. We just gave them yeses and nos. And that's the amount of information they needed. And we can back up that by saying, here's why. Here, we can show them a couple pictures and say, hey, here's your cracking that you're getting on there. Here's the spalling. Here's the divots. Here's the here's the rutting that we're having on our runway surface. So anyways, that's just an experience of how you need to adapt to your audience depending on who you're talking to. Again, I think it's important. I think it's very relevant to anything that you sit down to write, that you think about who is the intended audience. And then what's that message that I'm trying to get across to them? And I think okay, here you go. So what's important there is here's a table that was set up that I think is just really, really fun and to kind of think about. When you're in academics, so that's for me right now, and I'm writing these technical papers, I have a pretty single, well-defined, knowledgeable, captive audience. So when I'm writing my paper about my stuff that I'm doing for my research, which is in resilience of infrastructure, I'm looking at how we recover from infrastructure. I want to demonstrate the knowledge that I have, and I want to show them ways that we can do that better and more effectively. And I'm trying to capture that. However, when I talk to somebody else about my work, to include people in my own family, if I want to talk about friends or to my wife about what I'm doing, it is completely different how I will say, or I have family that ask me, hey, what are you studying? And how I respond to them is completely different than when I respond to other engineers that are in similar classes and in a similar field. And so I think it's so important that we understand that who we write to really, it should influence your writing and should influence the message that you're trying to get across. So also, if you note down here at the bottom, there's this purpose, and the purpose might be significantly different. And just a quick case in point, I was thinking about different journals that I could write an article to, and depending on who the audience was and the purpose of those journals actually would have directed the whole structure. A lot of it's the same information, but how I'm going to make this persuasive argument would change based on what the purpose was and who the audience was. So awesome. Well, that wraps up adapt to the audience. That's just a really important concept that I think you can apply in all your writing. Now, the next thing is maximizing your signal to noise ratio. And hopefully that makes sense to you. I used an example earlier about radio. And in your car, you have a radio. And when you're tuning to stations or you're seeking for a station, there's these spots in between stations where if I'm clicking through the tune or I'm turning the dial, it'll get a lot of static feedback. And you're not getting anything. You're not getting any kind of message. And then you get those parts that you can hear something, you can hear a song playing in the background, but you also get a lot of feedback, or you're getting like two different signals. And that's really hard to decipher. But then you click it one more notch, and all of a sudden you're right on the radio signal and you're getting a clear, clean message. That is what we're trying to do with this principle of maximizing our signal to noise ratio. And if we can maximize the right message that I'm trying to give people, that then helps us to make sure that we're being clear and concise, or well, not necessarily concise, but this is going to help us at least be clear in delivering the right message. So as an example, I want to pull up what's called an abstract. So this is an abstract. It's not my personal abstract. It's an example that was used, but I love this example. I think it's so great. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes to read it, and then we're going to reframe it. Okay. And we'll pull out and say, this is a message that I think translates so much better in this abstract. And I think this is really a culmination of these first two principles, actually adapting to your audience and thinking about your audience first, and then making sure we maximize that signal message. So here is that. So why don't you take a couple minutes and read that. All right. So hopefully you had a chance to read that. When I look at this, one thing that I quickly tuned into is this really long sentence right here. It starts with these. These include, and what are these? These are characteristics of this architecture that complicate the task. These being things that are making this a really hard thing to do. And they spend almost the entire paragraph right here just listing things that made this really, really, really hard, and says, which complicates program analysis and optimization. Basically saying, here's what was making this really difficult. And the bulk of that entire paragraph is just saying, this was hard to do. Now, I don't think that that was their message that they're trying to get across. So if we rework this, we can come with something more like this. And I'll break this down for you, okay? So if we first talk about the context, what's going on here? Well, there's this thing called a post-link time optimization. This is talking between systems and satellites and different things like that. And we have this architecture that's defining these links, okay? The reason why this post-link optimization, or this PLTO, can deliver significant performance improvement. Cool. Well, however, this has not been applied on this really complex architecture known as the Intel IA32. Got it. We haven't done one for this. Okay, so what's my task? What am I trying to accomplish? We developed a PLTO, a post-link time optimization, for this specific architecture that hasn't been done yet. Okay, this paper is now just going to describe this. It's going to address the complexities, which is what we read all about last time. We're going to talk about these complexities, and we're going to show you that it was able to achieve performance improvements. Cool. We found that it was at least 6%, so achieves moderate speed up of about 6% on average. And we're going to even think we're going to do better as we continue to work on this. And so all of a sudden, I now have a message that I'm delivering to people saying, hey, this is what we're doing. This is why it's important. No one's done this before. And now we've been able to do this and find process improvements of up to 6%. So if you care about that, read our paper. This is important because what you think is important as a scientist or engineer or technologist or a mathematician is not necessarily what a reader cares about, even a reader in your own field. There's so much information today. And so understanding where this information should be and how we can bring it out, pull out the right stuff to give to a reader, that's going to be so important. What the reader really cares about is that introduction that's going to define what the problem is, what the need was, and what you were doing. And then what did you find out? And so pulling all that forward into something we call the abstract is so important. This is not a copy paste. I know a lot of people, when they teach technical writing, they're just like, oh yeah, just kind of copy paste things and throw it back up in there. But intentionally thinking about what you're going to put up there, thinking about what message you're trying to deliver can be a very powerful thing when you're writing and doing technical writing. And again, it's really trying to answer two big questions to the reader. Do I care? As a reader, do I care about what you know and what you're showing me? And then as you show them the context and what the need was, and you show them those findings, they're going, do I need more? Do I need to read your full article? And all of a sudden it's this captivating message of saying, there is something here for you. You want this process improvement? Read on. And that's just a really powerful thing. So I think that's how we can maximize, at least one way we can maximize that signal to noise ratio, is being intentional about what we're trying to say in order to continue to convey that right message. So last thing I'm going to share before we get to some Q&A and just some time with you to kind of make sure we're covering our bases. Okay, using effective redundancy. So using effective redundancy, this is often seen in scientific writing, when we have a figure or a graph or a chart of some sort, and it conveys certain information, and usually we have a caption with that, and then right alongside it, I'll have text that I've written and have a written description of what you should be seeing. We always want to make sure that we write the text as if the picture is not there, and they could create this mental image in their mind, or they would be able to pull the same information out of the text as they could from the image. And then I want to make sure I present the image and the caption with all the information that's needed so they don't need the text. That's an effective use of redundancy as we look at both of these. Now, here's an example using the document text for a figure. I'm not going to show you the figure, but I want you to just look at this. I'll give you a few, probably about 30 seconds to read through this real quick. It's a different topic than the other one, but you should be able to look through that. If it doesn't make complete sense, that's okay. So let's talk about this. We want to point them to where the figure is. Okay, so we're going to keep figure 2, but then this part is like shows the evolution of the geranium content of the. When I see the picture, I should be able to get that from there. Okay, and then obviously is really kind of a frontal assault on you. Obviously should have gotten this, so catch up. And I think that there's something to be said for that too. So then we rephrase this, and it's just this top section, and we're going to change it to basically say what I wanted to communicate was this content was decreasing linearly with increasing fluence of this region that was at 2 times 10 to the 17th atoms per centimeter squared. So as we take out some of those things that were ineffective, and I really state what I wanted you to pull from the graph and what I want you to pull from the text, all of a sudden I can have a clear communicating message, and I can use both the graph and the text to convey that correctly. Now, this is a different style. A lot of people like to say figure 2 shows blah, 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 blah. But why? Why are you showing this correlation? What's the reason? And if we can get to that answer of, so what? So why are you showing me that? All of a sudden, that's the message we want to convey. And if I put my focus there and I write to that point, then I think we can be a little more effective in communicating it. So with that, that really wraps up the things that I think are so important in technical writing, that we adapt to our audience, and that could change, right? If you're writing a technical paper right now in high school, the people you write to may just be Miss Bill's Tenny, and that's okay, right? But if you're writing to a larger audience, if you're putting your paper out there for some sort of symposium, which they have a lot of STEM symposiums for kids in high school and middle school, then that's a different audience. And you got to know that audience and speak to them. You want to maximize that signal to noise ratio, making sure you say exactly what you meant to say, and focus on that message will really, really help. And then using effective redundancy. All of those are so key to us making sure that we are appropriate and are making sure that we write correctly and well. So I think that those will help you a bunch. So now I want to address some questions. I think I saw one already in there. If you want to throw something in the Google Forms, that's fine. But I also want to hear what you thought about this. And I don't know, Ms. Bilstetti, if you want to do similar to what we did last time, kind of how's this connecting with your class and what you're talking about. But I'll let you do that while I'm looking up some of these questions on the
Fabulous. Great opportunity to turn to your neighbor, or those of you who are working from home, throw it in the chat. What are some connections between what he's taught you today and what you've been learning over the last week, quarter, half year? What do you feel like? What are some connections? Okay. Did you have any questions in there, Brigham?
I did, yes. So there was basically one person asked me what made me want to join the military. And I think that's a great question. Very quickly, I'd say I always felt a patriotic duty. I love the idea of being able to defend freedoms that I appreciate and that I want to make sure everyone has an opportunity to have. some of those freedoms are contested. And I think that that's something that really motivated me, was to be able to defend those freedoms. One also person said, what's one of the struggles with being an engineer and traveling so much? You know, one of the beauties of being in the military and traveling is my family came with me a lot of the time. But definitely there was times that I couldn't take my family. And I think that was hard, because then it's just hard to live almost separate lives at times. So that was the most difficult thing, but really cool opportunities to go see the world. And my family's been able to go some amazing places with me. So that's been really cool. So I have a daughter that was born in Germany, and we have family experiences we've had in all over the globe. So that's been cool. And then one person asked, what kind of things do I write about? And I write about all sorts of stuff. Some of it can be very opinion heavy, and like, what do we think as engineers? And some of it's very, very technical. In like, I'm writing a mathematical formulation that covers about 3 pages of text. So it's pretty comprehensive.
So then I want him to hear from you some of the things that you were saying as you were talking to one another. So anybody want to kind of share, like, what connections you're seeing between what we've talked about this year and what you were learning about here with Major Moore? So anybody want to be the person to talk? All right, here's Will.
Oh, I gotta talk face to face. I get in effect, like the redundancy thing kind of helped me understand like how specific I need to be with my writing, and it kind of cleared things up for me.
Cool.
Awesome.
Anybody else? Connections you were seeing? You were talking to one another? Anybody? Cameron, gonna say something? Good to see you, Cambry. All right. So, oops. Pressed a button. Anybody else?
Well, thanks, Will, for being brave.
I agree. This class is sometimes opinionated and sometimes not. The way they roll. Next period, you'll see they're my loud ones. Thank you so much for joining us. Everybody say thank you.
Thank you.
Wave goodbye.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful day. And hopefully none of you get into quarantine soon.
Yeah, no more quarantines. All right, see you in about 5 minutes, okay?
All right, sounds good. Thanks.